Howdy, and welcome to the second video, or set of videos in this case, for Cybersecurity Law and Policy Week 1. What I want to do is make sure we have a common body of knowledge and are familiar with cybersecurity terms. Some of you will know this material because you are from more technical areas. However, our class includes those from business schools, sometimes the Bush School and other liberal arts areas, so I like to be sure everyone's familiar with the terms. Waiting for the slide to advance. And of course, I just love this picture, so I included it a second time. Here's what you need to know. I basically want you to know and understand the terminology enough to use it and be comfortable with it. Want you to be able to think about security trends and how that may affect the law, or how cyber attacks can go down, what adversaries are looking for, and again, how that can affect the law. Because if we can properly attribute, that is, know who is what or what is behind the attack because of their motive, then we know which frame of law that we can use to go after them. Basically, what we're going to try to do is give you a technical frame of reference to analyze law. Now, if you find terms you don't know, go to reliable sources. Gives me a minute to get here, such as this NIST government site, which of course is down because of our shutdown, so I can't show that, or the National Initiatives for Cybersecurity Careers and Studies. Now, let's say we want to look up a word. Let's look up the word confidentiality. We're all familiar with confidential. We want our data to be kept confidential, but let's see if we can find it in this list. There it is. A property that information is not disclosed to users, processes, or devices unless they've been authorized to access the information. Okay? Now, what's important in a definition is where it came from. This is from something called the CNSSI. This is the NIST SP800 documentation. NIST, as we saw, is National Institute of Standards and Technology. The SP800, any SP800 documents are about cybersecurity, and if and when their site comes back up, I will post a lecture on this. In the meantime, I might go back and see if I can find an old lecture. But then we come across this code, 44 USC section 3542. This tells us that it's the United States Code. It's under Title 44, and it is section 3542. And sometimes instead of section, you see some little squiggly S's. Basically, what that tells us is that is a legal definition. All right, well, wait a minute. What difference does that make to us? Well, if a word has a legal definition as defined in the law, we must stick exactly to that definition. If it has a technical definition only, there may be 2 or 3 different definitions depending on what the body is. And then we have to decide which one is more pertinent. But having a legal definition is the place to start. So when you find a term, always stop and look to see if it has a legal definition using one of these 2 sources. Now let's look at some other words. Let's see. We've got ABC here. Let's look up critical infrastructure. And I guess I was at the C's. I should have stayed there. Okay, critical infrastructure. We're going to throw that word around. The systems and assets, whether physical or virtual, so vital to society that the incapacity or destruction of such may have a debilitating impact on the security, economy, public health or safety, environment, or any other combination of these matters. Okay? Now, what's unfortunate here is this reference does not show this as any kind of legal term. It just shows us the National Infrastructure Protection Plan. So we don't want to assume anything. And let's see if this site has come back yet. So let's look up that plan. Okay, so we're going to look a little bit. What is it? It's a document called for by the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 7. That sounds important. Okay, so we're going to look up this, which hopefully the website will work. Yay, it does, right? And we're going to look at this, And what we will eventually find is that the critical infrastructure, I won't go through it now, this site should bring it up, does have a legal definition. And it is defined under a law that turns out to be from the Patriot Act. Okay, so what if I couldn't find it there? Well, I can look here at cornell.edu. That is a good website. If you can't find a .gov, you look here, and it shows you the actual law. Now, I use the word statutory, and this is what I'm referring to. This is a statute. It is in U.S. Code. It's Title 42. It's Section 5195. It gives you a short title. It tells you some findings. It tells you some policies. It tells you this and this and this. Laws are actually very boring to read. And then, look, critical infrastructure defined. So in this section, the term this, right here is what I'm looking at, gives the definition we just said, and it is part of U.S. Code. So critical infrastructure does have a legal definition as well. And as we go through this course, just be aware of what does or does not have a legal definition. Let's go back to our slides, which it took us back here, which is not what I wanted. I wanted here. So NIST is a good one. Unfortunately, because of the shutdown, embarrassingly enough, the website is not responding. The second one I showed you, notice the .gov is the United States CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team. Otherwise, Google the term and see what comes up with, but be able to discern the internet source, as I showed you in critical infrastructure. Be careful of the sites you go to. Also be careful of thinking, oh, I know what this term means. I know what computer means. Well, computer is defined in the CFAA, Computer Fraud Abuse Act. And that is the definition that when the courts have had to interpret if something is a hack in a computer, whether it is or not. So government sources are the best. Failing that, go to the cornell.edu because I find it, well, good. And don't assume that because you know the technical definition, you know the legal definition. So when we talk about CIA, all three of these now we know have legal definitions. We talk about the basis of security. Number one is confidentiality. We want to keep data confidential. We do not want it disclosed to unauthorized sources. We want to ensure that if the integrity of the data is intact, that the data is real and accurate. And lastly, we want to be sure that it is available. So think of this. If there is a hack and it's breaching into a financial house company, then if the confidentiality is at risk and they can't stop the hack, they'll turn the systems off because confidentiality trumps integrity, trumps availability. So here's what I just showed you, that this is in USC Code, again, Title 44, Section 3542, United States Code. If you say CFR, it means Code of Federal Regulations, which is derived from that, from the USC. So they both are statutory law. Now, one more comment here. For instance, here's a term that has these three definitions, right? The second one is FIPS, Federal Information Processes Standard. The other is CNSSI, and I always forget what the acronym is, but it is a compendium of glossary and terminology. The legal definition trumps all. Just keep that in mind. It may not be a good one. The definition for a computer, the legal statutory definition, that is, as a statute, defined as a statute, is not necessarily a good one. Later on in the class, we'll look at it and you'll probably have a laugh or two. But guess what? That is the law. Okay, I'm going to leave this for you to do. This is just not anything that's going to be graded, but I want you to take some time to figure out if there's a statutory legal definition for privacy. And we'll talk about this later this week. And then what are these? Is it C? Is it I? Is it A? Does it breach confidentiality, integrity, or availability? because what you'll find is often a law will focus on confidentiality and integrity, but not availability. So perhaps your data was kept confidential, but you couldn't get to it. Well, guess what? You don't have any protection under that law. So think about this recent technical advances that challenge this. For instance, people tend to put a lot out on social media. Have they given away their privacy rights? Okay, when you put that out yourself and someone takes data point A and some data point B and C and puts it together and comes up with some very damning or personal information, is the fact that the person who that data is about knowingly put that data out on social media. This not only challenges it, but it causes a lot of confusion in our courts. And this is an underlying theme we will have this year as we go forward. Now, that is the end of that module, and stay tuned for the next module. Thank you for staying with me.